Welcome to Zarela HOA Stories, where every quiet neighborhood hides a storm waiting to break. If you love powerful, emotional stories that hit deep, make sure to subscribe before we begin. Chapter 1. The Edge of the Water. The air smelled of rain and dust. Clouds pressed low over the valley, and the sound of distant thunder rolled between the hills like a warning that had gone unheard for years. Daniel Mercer stood alone on the cracked concrete of the old dam, his hand resting on the cold, rusted lever his father once called the heart of the valley. Below him stretched what used to be his land, 200 acres of green, quiet peace, now carved into perfect squares of paved streets, streetlights, and newly built homes that all looked the same. He could still remember where the orchard had been, where his father used to sit in the evenings and listen to the crickets. That spot was now a cul-de-sac with a marble fountain. The sight burned him more than the cold rain. An SUV approached along the narrow road behind him, its tires hissing on wet gravel. Claire stepped out, a navy coat wrapped tight around her shoulders. Her hair clung to her face, and though she smiled faintly, her eyes told another story. Exhaustion, maybe guilt. "Daniel," she called, voice almost drowned by the wind. "You shouldn't be here. It's not safe during the storm." He didn't turn. "I've stood here in worse storms. This place has held longer than those houses down there ever will." She came closer, careful on the slick ground. "It's over," she said softly. "The deal's done. You can't keep torturing yourself like this." Daniel finally looked at her, his gaze sharp. "The deal? That's what you call it now." He pointed toward the valley. "They built 50 homes on my land, my father's land. And you expect me to stand here and pretend it's progress?" Claire's voice trembled. "You are drowning in debt, Dan. Taxes, maintenance, everything. You refused every offer. Someone had to make a decision." "Someone," he repeated bitterly. "You mean you?" A flash of thunder lit the sky, revealing the sadness in her face. "I thought I was saving us," she whispered. "You, me, Lily. We could finally start over." He shook his head slowly. "Start over on the bones of everything my father built?" She stepped forward, reaching for his arm, but he moved away. "You don't understand. You're letting this land eat you alive," she said, her voice rising above the rain. "They didn't steal it, Daniel. You let go." The words hit like a slap. He turned toward the reservoir, where rain danced across the surface, feeding the water that pressed against the gates. "You think I'll let it go?" he said quietly. "No, Claire. I'm still holding it back." For a long moment, neither spoke. The valley below shimmered with construction lights, small and fragile against the dark. Daniel's chest tightened. Every nail, every wall, every house was a trespass. He could hear the echo of his father's words. "Water remembers, son. It always comes home." Claire's phone buzzed in her coat pocket, breaking the silence. She turned slightly, the glow of the screen reflecting against her face. Daniel noticed the name, Thomas Hale, HOA president. Her thumb hovered over the screen before she silenced it. "It's nothing," she said quickly. But Daniel's eyes had already hardened. "Nothing," he repeated. "Seems like there's a lot of that lately." She swallowed hard, unsure what to say. The rain grew heavier, the valley below blurring behind a sheet of gray. Finally, she whispered, "Please come home." Daniel didn't move. He watched the water swirl, the surface trembling under the storm. "Go ahead," he said quietly. "I'll follow soon." As her SUV disappeared down the road, Daniel stood alone again, the last Mercer on Mercerland. The wind howled through the dam's iron rails, and deep within the concrete, the floodgates groaned as if something ancient had stirred awake. He whispered to the storm, "Let's see if they can build high enough." Chapter 2. Cracks beneath the paint. Morning came gray and heavy. The storm had passed, but the world felt washed out. Too quiet, too still. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, a mug of cold coffee untouched beside a stack of unpaid bills. The faint hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Through the window, he could see Lily waiting for her school bus at the end of the gravel driveway, her backpack too big for her small shoulders. Claire moved around the kitchen, her heels clicking softly on the tile. "You didn't sleep again," she said without looking at him. Daniel didn't answer. He was staring at a folded document on the table, a property transfer notice, the one she'd said she'd taken care of. "Did Thomas Hale give you this?" he finally asked, his tone calm but distant. Claire hesitated mid-step. "It's from the county office." "What?" He turned the paper around. "Because his name is on it, along with yours." Her breath caught. "Daniel, it's just paperwork. The HOA manages the lots now. It's standard procedure." "Standard procedure for them to build homes on a dam-controlled floodplain?" he asked, voice low. "Or standard procedure for you to sign my name without asking?" Claire's eyes flashed. "I did what was necessary. You've been holding on to ghosts. That land wasn't feeding us, it was draining us." He leaned back, studying her. "You sound just like him." "Like who?" "Thomas Hale." The air between them went still. Claire opened her mouth to argue, but Lily's voice interrupted. "Mom, the bus is here." Claire exhaled and grabbed her purse. "We'll talk later," she said, heading for the door. Daniel watched her leave, but his eyes drifted to her phone, left charging on the counter. The screen lit briefly with a notification. New message from Thomas Hale. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. That afternoon, Daniel drove down toward the construction site. The new neighborhood, Silver Pines Estates, looked like a painting. White fences, trimmed lawns, concrete so fresh it still smelled of lime. Workers moved like ants, their laughter echoing. And at the center of it all stood Thomas Hale, tall, gray-suited, all charm and confidence. "Mr. Mercer," Thomas greeted when he noticed him. "Didn't expect you down here." "Beautiful, isn't it?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "You built it on a floodplain." "My floodplain." Thomas smiled easily. "We ran the surveys. The dam's solid. No risk. You should be proud. This land is finally worth something." Daniel studied him, noticing the glint of an expensive watch, the fake warmth in his voice. "And my wife? Is she proud too?" Thomas's smile faltered just for a second. Claire understands opportunity when she sees it. Daniel stepped closer. "I'm sure she does." For a moment, the wind carried only the sound of hammering and rain dripping from the eaves. Thomas adjusted his cufflinks, forcing a polite tone. "I know this is hard, Daniel, but progress doesn't wait for sentiment. You either move forward or you get left behind." Daniel's eyes drifted toward the homes. 50 of them, each sitting low against the slope, each connected by the same drainage lines that disappeared toward the reservoir. "Progress," he repeated quietly. "We'll see how far forward it goes." That night, Daniel sat on the porch, watching the lights flicker across the valley. Claire was still out. She'd said she was meeting a client. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch with a book open across her chest. The sound of the rain returned, soft at first, then steady. Daniel's gaze moved to the dam again, barely visible through the mist. He knew every valve, every rusted bolt, every sound it made when pressure built behind the gates. He whispered to himself, "They think the water's tamed." From the dark, thunder rolled, distant, almost approving. But inside the house, on the counter, Claire's phone buzzed once more. Message from Thomas Hale. "It's done. He'll never know the rest." And outside, down in the valley, the foundations of Silver Pines Estates gleamed wet under the storm, small cracks beginning to show where the water met the earth. Chapter 3. The Whisper Beneath the Floorboards. The next morning, sunlight broke weakly through the clouds, glinting off the wet grass. Daniel sat in his truck near the edge of the property, staring down at the valley below. The construction crews had left early, their trucks lined like metal carcasses along the dirt road. It should have been quiet, but even the silence of Silver Pines Estates felt loud. It was the sound of something built too fast on ground that didn't want it. He turned the radio off. For a long time, he just listened to the faint rush of the dam water far below. Something inside him whispered that it wasn't done talking. Inside the Mercer house, the mood was colder than the morning wind. Claire moved through the hallway, her heels sharp against the wood floor. She was dressed for another client meeting, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. "Will you be home for dinner?" Daniel asked from the kitchen doorway. She froze mid-step. "What?" "Because Lily asked," he said quietly. "She misses you." Claire hesitated, her expression softening, then hardening again. "Tell her I'll make it up to her this weekend." Daniel nodded once. You've been saying that a lot lately. She didn't respond. Her eyes flicked toward the counter, where a manila folder lay half-covered beneath yesterday's mail. Daniel followed her gaze and noticed how her hand twitched slightly, as if to grab it, but then thought better of it. Claire, he said, voice level, what's in that folder? Nothing, she said too quickly, forcing a smile. Just some listings. But when she turned away, her face had lost its color. Hours later, when the house had gone still again, Daniel walked back into the kitchen. The folder was gone, but a small corner of paper remained torn off under a magazine. He pulled it free. It wasn't a listing. It was part of a legal document, a title release. His name, Daniel Mercer, appeared faintly in the carbon copy, along with one other, Claire Mercer, witness and signatory. He exhaled slowly, pressing his thumb over the edge of his name. There was proof. He folded it and slid it into his jacket pocket. That night, Daniel drove toward the community center that the HOA used as their office. The lights were still on. Through the glass windows, he could see Thomas Hale sitting at a long table, a glass of wine beside him. Claire stood at his shoulder, gesturing to a blueprint spread across the table. Daniel's fingers gripped the steering wheel. The parking lot light flickered above him, bathing everything in a cold yellow hue. Inside, Thomas smiled, leaning closer to Claire as they spoke in hushed tones. Daniel couldn't hear them, but the way Claire laughed, soft, uneasy, told him enough. He felt something inside him twist. It wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. Thomas handed her a pen. Claire hesitated, then signed something. Her hand shook slightly before she set the pen down. Daniel's heartbeat drummed in his ears. He watched her lips move, catching fragments of what she said through the glass. He won't find out. It's only until the permit's clear. The wind outside picked up, scattering leaves across the pavement. Daniel started the truck, headlights flashing briefly against the window. Both of them looked up, but by the time Claire stepped outside, the truck was gone, swallowed by the darkness. When Daniel returned home, the house was silent. Lily's bedroom door was half open. She was asleep with her headphones in. On the counter lay a family photo, the three of them at the dam years ago, before everything changed. His father's arm was around him, the water calm behind them. He picked it up, staring at the frozen smiles. You said the water remembers, he whispered. Outside, thunder rolled again in the distance, faint, but closer this time. And far below, through the mist and mud, a thin line of water trickled down one of the new foundations at Silver Pines Estates. A small, quiet warning. Chapter 4, Cracks in the Foundation. Rain had been falling for 2 days straight. Not heavy enough to flood, but steady, the kind of rain that seeped into the soil and made the world feel heavier. Daniel stood on the dam's overlook, hood pulled up, watching as the water pressed against the steel gates. Every drop added weight to what was coming. He didn't come here to brood. He came to think. And lately, the dam was the only place that made sense. His father had built it decades ago, with the idea that it would protect their land. Control the water, and you control the valley, his father used to say. But Daniel realized now, it wasn't just about the water. It was about trust, about who you allowed to build on what was yours. Back at the Mercer house, Claire's car was already in the driveway when Daniel returned. She was sitting at the kitchen table, hair damp, her laptop open. Legal papers were spread out in front of her like a battlefield. You were at the HOA office again, Daniel said, voice calm but cold. She flinched. You followed me? I saw you signing something with Hale. You told me you were meeting clients. Claire sighed, rubbing her temples. Daniel, you don't understand. Then make me understand, he cut in, because I found a title release with my name on it, signed by you. Her eyes widened just enough for him to see the truth flicker behind them. Thomas said it was temporary, she whispered. We needed his approval for the rezoning permits. He promised the land would still be in our name. Daniel slammed his hand on the table, papers scattering. Our land? Claire, my father left that to us. You handed it to them. The room fell silent except for the hum of the rain outside. Claire's eyes shimmered, but her voice stayed sharp. You think I wanted this? You think I had a choice? We were drowning in debt, Daniel. The farm, the property taxes. Thomas offered to save everything by selling it out from under me. It was supposed to be just a signature, she said weakly. He said it was legal protection, a formality. Daniel turned away, gripping the counter. Thomas Hale doesn't protect people. He owns them. Claire's breath hitched. For a moment, Daniel thought she might tell him everything. But then her phone buzzed, a message. She glanced at it, and her expression changed. Fear. Who is it? He asked. No one, she said too fast, locking the screen. Daniel, please just let me fix this. But Daniel wasn't listening anymore. He walked to the window, staring out at the valley. The construction lights flickered in the distance, a skeletal glow against the rain. They're still building, he muttered. They're building on my land. Claire stood, her voice trembling. If you go there, you'll make things worse. He turned slowly, eyes cold. They already did. By nightfall, Daniel's truck was parked near the edge of Silver Pines Estates. The rain had turned the dirt roads into rivers of mud. He moved between the half-finished homes, flashlight cutting through the storm. The sound of drilling echoed faintly. Even now, some crew was working late under a tarp. He found a small trailer with the HOA logo painted on the side. Inside, blueprints were pinned to the walls. One showed the entire valley, including the dam. Daniel's gaze froze on a red-marked note near the base of the reservoir. Proposed pump extension. Requires private easement transfer, Mercer land. They weren't just building homes. They were planning to tap into the water source, his water source. The one his father built. He snapped a photo with his phone and slipped out into the rain again, heart pounding. Back home, Claire was waiting by the door. Her eyes were red, her voice quiet. Daniel, what did you do? He brushed past her. I saw the plans. They want to drain the dam. Please, she whispered, grabbing his arm. If you fight them, they'll destroy us. Daniel stopped, looking down at her trembling hand. No, he said finally. They already did. Outside, thunder cracked, louder this time. And from the valley below, the construction lights flickered, one by one, until the whole site was swallowed by darkness. Chapter 5. The Silent Agreement. Morning came gray and heavy, the kind of morning that carried the weight of unfinished arguments. The rain had stopped, but the world still dripped with it. Rooftops glistening, mud thick under boots, air heavy with the smell of wet wood and concrete. Daniel sat on the porch, a cup of untouched coffee cooling in his hand, as the valley below shimmered in the dull light. From this view, Silver Pines Estates looked small, just a cluster of pale skeletons rising where his father's fields used to be. But to Daniel, it looked like an invasion. He heard Claire's footsteps behind him before she spoke. Thomas Hale called, she said quietly. He wants to meet. He said, it's time to talk face to face. Daniel didn't turn. He can come here if he wants to talk. He won't, Claire replied. He said you should come to the HOA headquarters. Noon. He made it sound final. Daniel's jaw tightened. He knew what that meant. When Hale asked for a meeting, it wasn't to negotiate. It was to remind people who held the pen. By noon, Daniel's truck rolled to a stop in front of the Silver Pines HOA office. The building stood in sharp contrast to everything around it. Clean, white stone, manicured hedges, not a single imperfection in sight. Even the rain had seemed to avoid it. Inside, the air smelled of polished oak and money. Hale sat behind a long table, surrounded by files, contracts, and two men in suits who didn't need introductions. The kind of men who made problems disappear. Daniel, Hale greeted with that politician smile. You've caused quite a stir. Daniel didn't sit. You build on land that's not yours. Not anymore, Hale said smoothly, sliding a folder across the table. Your wife's signature makes it ours. Everything was done legally. Daniel stared down at the paper. His name, crossed out, replaced by Silver Pines Development Authority. The signature beneath, it was Claire's. Shaky, hesitant, but real. She didn't understand what she was signing, Daniel said. Hale leaned back, folding his hands. Intent doesn't change ownership. You of all people should know that. Besides, she was acting in your household's best interest. My best interest? Daniel's voice darkened. You took my father's land. You're choking the valley dry. Hale's smile vanished. Let's be clear, Mr. Mercer. You can't stop this. The homes are nearly finished. The investors are happy. If you make trouble, I'll make sure you lose more than just your land. Daniel's knuckles whitened around the folder. For a moment, no one spoke. Only the faint hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. Then Daniel said, very quietly, "You made one mistake." Hale raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" "You built below the dam." Hale frowned, but Daniel was already walking out. That evening, Claire sat on the edge of the bed, holding her phone. The message from Hale still glowed on the screen. "Keep him calm. Don't let him near the reservoir." Her hand shook as she deleted it. When Daniel walked in, she forced a smile. "Did it go bad?" "It went exactly how I expected," he said, pulling off his jacket. "They think they own me." Claire hesitated. "What are you going to do?" Daniel looked out the window toward the valley. The dam lights blinked faintly in the distance, steady, patient, waiting. "Something my father would have done," he said softly. Late that night, Daniel drove back to the dam. The air was cold and still. The control shed door creaked open, the metal hinges whining in protest. Inside, he ran his hand over the levers. The main floodgate switch gleamed faintly under his flashlight. He didn't touch it. Not yet. But he stood there a long time, imagining what would happen if he did. The houses below, the roads, the people who thought they could take everything from him, they'd all vanish under the weight of the same water his father once built to protect. As he left, the rain began again, light, rhythmic, relentless. And this time, Daniel didn't mind. Chapter 6. The Pressure Builds. The next morning dawned pale and brittle, the kind of day that looks calm on the surface but hums with unease underneath. Mist rolled low across the valley, curling through the unfinished streets of Silver Pines Estates. The rumble of machinery carried faintly up to the old Mercer property, steady, relentless, like a heartbeat Daniel couldn't escape. He stood by the kitchen window, watching the fog drift over what used to be his father's fields. A faint vibration shook the ground, bulldozers working where crops once grew. The sight burned in his chest. Every steel frame that rose out of that soil was a reminder of what they'd stolen. Claire entered quietly, her eyes shadowed with sleeplessness. "You didn't come to bed," she said softly. Daniel didn't answer. He just kept staring out the window, coffee growing cold in his hands. "Thomas called again," she continued. "He said the HOA is finalizing the easement for the reservoir. They want your signature for the last inspection." Daniel's laugh was short and bitter. "They still think I'll sign?" Her voice trembled. "Daniel, please. If you fight this, they'll destroy us. They already froze the accounts. I can't even pay the property tax without their approval." He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "So, they're using my land to starve me out." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "I never meant for this to happen." Daniel's voice softened, but only slightly. "Then stop helping them make it worse." By afternoon, Daniel drove down to the reservoir. The dam stretched across the valley like a sleeping giant, calm on the surface but brimming with power underneath. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of algae and wet stone. He stepped into the control shed again, the same metal structure where he'd stood nights before. This time, he carried a small toolbox. He opened the panel beneath the main lever, revealing a nest of thick cables and switches. Carefully, he traced one wire with his fingers. His father's old maintenance notes still hung nearby, yellowed and smudged with oil. Gate pressure valves, manual override required for full release. Daniel smiled faintly. His father had built this dam to last through anything: flood, storm, neglect. But not betrayal. Back in town, Hale was meeting with his board in the HOA office. "Mercer's stalling," one of the men said. "He's been spotted near the dam several times." Hale didn't look concerned. "Let him. Once the final construction phase is approved, we'll have the county condemn whatever's left of his property. He won't have the power to stop anything." Another man asked, "And his wife?" Hale's smirk returned. "Claire understands the stakes. She'll keep him calm. For now." But outside that same office in the parking lot, Claire sat her car, hands gripping the steering wheel, tears streaking her face. She had overheard every word through the half-open window. That evening, she confronted Daniel. "They're planning to take everything," she whispered. They said they'll condemn the property once the homes are done. Daniel didn't look surprised. I know, you know. Then why aren't you fighting? He finally turned to her, eyes cold and steady. Because fighting means playing by their rules. And I'm done doing that. Claire's voice cracked. What are you planning? Daniel stepped closer, his voice low. Do you remember what my father always said about the dam? She shook her head slowly. Control the water, and you control the valley. He paused. They built their dreams on stolen ground. I just need to remind them who really owns it. Her lips parted, fear flashing across her face. Daniel, no, you can't. But he was already walking away, the door swinging shut behind him. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the scent of wet soil and thunder. In the distance, the lights of silver pines gleamed faintly through the fog. Rows of bright, new homes standing proudly, unaware that the foundation beneath them was shifting. Daniel stopped by the edge of the field, looking down at the valley below. The storm clouds gathered again, dark and full, as if nature itself was waiting for his command. He whispered into the wind, "You took everything that was mine. Let's see how much you can take back." Lightning flickered over the dam in the distance, just once sharp and white, like the first spark of vengeance. And with that, Daniel turned toward the control shed, his steps slow, deliberate, unstoppable. Chapter 7. The Calm Before the Breach. The storm rolled in quietly that night, creeping over the valley like a secret that refused to stay buried. The air was thick, electric. Every gust of wind carried the scent of something coming. Daniel stood at the edge of the reservoir, staring at the faint shimmer of the water below. The floodlights from the dam cast long shadows over his face, making him look like a man carved out of stone. Down in the valley, Silver Pines Estates glowed with artificial peace. Neat rows of half-built homes, street lamps flickering through the mist. To anyone passing by, it looked like a promise of a perfect future. To Daniel, it looked like a graveyard waiting to fill. Earlier that evening, Claire had gone into town. Or, at least, that's what she told him. In truth, she had gone to the county office, her last desperate attempt to stop what she knew Daniel was planning. Her hands trembled as she spoke to the clerk. There has to be something, she pleaded. A way to reverse the land transfer. My husband never agreed to the sale. The clerk shook his head. Ma'am, the documents are binding. Once the HOA got the easement, it's no longer under your jurisdiction. Claire's voice cracked. But it's our home. You don't understand what they've done. The clerk's tone softened, but his words didn't help. I'm sorry. Legally, there's nothing left in your name. She left the building with her heart pounding, rain soaking her hair, her mind racing with dread. She had betrayed him once with a signature she didn't understand. She couldn't betray him again by staying silent. Back at the dam, Daniel was finishing what he had started. The maintenance hatch beneath the floodgate groaned open, revealing the pressure valves his father had installed decades ago. The levers were stiff, rusted from years of neglect, but Daniel knew their design better than anyone. He knelt, flashlight beam glinting off metal. He had rerouted the control lines earlier that day, setting the system to manual release. All that was left now was one final connection, a single lever that would decide everything. For a moment, he hesitated. He remembered his father's voice, rough and sure, echoing from a past. This dam protects lives, son. Don't ever use it to destroy. Daniel's jaw tightened. It's not me destroying, Dad. They already did that. Claire's car came skidding up the gravel road moments later, headlights slicing through the fog. She climbed out, calling his name, her voice breaking against the storm. Daniel, please, we can still fix this. He turned, rain running down his face, eyes cold and distant. There's nothing left to fix. She stepped closer, shaking her head. If you do this, you'll lose everything, even what's left of yourself. Daniel looked past her, toward the valley. They took the land, the house, the name. What's left for them to take? Me, she whispered. You'll lose me. For a heartbeat, he froze. The wind howled around them, thunder cracking overhead. Something in her eyes, fear, regret, love, reached the part of him that was still human. He wanted to believe her, to stop, to let it go. But then his phone buzzed. A single message from an unknown number. Final construction inspection cleared. HOA officially owns the Mercer Valley. Daniel read it once, twice, and something inside him snapped. His hand moved to the lever. "Daniel, don't!" Claire screamed. He didn't pull it. Not yet. But he looked at her with a calm so deep it frightened her more than anger ever could. "They built 50 homes on my land," he said softly. "Now they'll understand what it means to take something that wasn't theirs." He walked past her, leaving muddy footprints across the dam's concrete floor. Claire followed, crying, begging, but his pace didn't break. Lightning flashed again, a long, white scar across the black sky. The air smelled of ozone and whetstone. Somewhere in the distance, the faint echo of hammering came from the construction site, the workers still chasing deadlines, unaware of the storm building above them. Daniel stopped one last time, his hand resting on the rusted lever. He didn't pull it. Not yet. But the decision was made, as certain as the thunder that rolled through the valley. Down below, silver pines slept under a curtain of rain, each window glowing with false comfort. And up above, at the dam, a man stood between mercy and ruin, one heartbeat away from unleashing both. Chapter 8. Cracks in the Wall. The storm didn't ease by morning. It grew. Heavy sheets of rain lashed the valley, soaking through the half-finished roofs of Silver Pines estates. What had started as a light drizzle had turned into a ceaseless downpour, and the soil beneath the homes was beginning to bleed water. Inside the Mercer farmhouse, Claire sat by the window, clutching her phone. She hadn't slept. Her hair clung to her face, her eyes swollen from crying. Daniel hadn't come back after their confrontation. His truck was still gone, and she knew where he was, standing at the dam, keeping watch like a man guarding the edge of a war. She whispered to herself, "Please, don't do this." Then the doorbell rang. When she opened the door, Thomas Hale stood there, dressed in a dark raincoat, umbrella dripping on the porch. His smile was gone. His tone was clipped, all business. "Mrs. Mercer, we need to talk." Her stomach tightened. "You shouldn't be here." "Oh, I think I should," he said, stepping inside without invitation. "Your husband's been seen at the dam multiple times this week. The board is concerned. We've also received warnings." Claire froze. Warnings? Hale pulled a folder from his coat pocket. Inside were printed photos. Daniel at the control shed, flashlight in hand, storm raging around him. Someone had been watching. "You see why I'm here," Hale continued. "If he tampers with that structure, every home in this valley is at risk. You need to stop him before he does something stupid." Claire's heart pounded. "And how do you know he's done anything at all?" Hale leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Because I know men like him. They let pride turn into vengeance. You should be very careful which side you're standing on, Claire. If he opens that dam, it's not just the HOA that pays. You will too." He turned to leave, his words sharp as thunder. "Tell him the county's sending inspectors tonight. If there's any sign of tampering, they'll press charges. Hard." When the door shut behind him, Claire stood frozen, the echo of his footsteps still ringing in her ears. At the dam, Daniel stood inside the control shed, water dripping from his jacket. The rain had pushed the reservoir past its usual level. The roar of the current was louder now, angrier. The red floodlight flickered above him, warning of high pressure. He stared at the lever. One pull, and everything below would be swallowed. The thought didn't scare him anymore. It felt inevitable. His phone buzzed. A message from Claire. "They're sending inspectors tonight. Please come home before it's too late." He read it twice, then deleted it. He knew the HOA didn't care about safety. They just didn't want to lose control. Still, a small part of him, buried deep beneath anger, wanted to believe her. Maybe she wasn't lying this time. Maybe she really wanted to save what was left of them. He stepped outside, looking down the slope at the valley. The construction lights flickered through the rain, reflecting in the rising pools of water. The earth was slick now, soft, the kind of soil that didn't hold weight for long. And then he noticed it. A faint crack along the dam's left spillway. Small but spreading. Daniel knelt, tracing it with his fingers. The rainwater was seeping in. He checked the pressure gauge near the control shed. The needle trembled dangerously near the red zone. This wasn't supposed to happen yet, he muttered. He rushed back into the shed, flipping open his father's old blueprints. He found the weak point immediately, the expansion joint at the base. Years of erosion had worn it down. One good surge, and the water wouldn't need his help to break free. Back in town, Hale sat in his car outside the HOA office, staring at his phone. A worker had just called. "Sir, there's been a small leak near the dam. Nothing major, but the pressure's building fast." Hale's face darkened. "Lock down the site. I don't want that man anywhere near it." He hung up, unaware that Daniel was already there, not breaking the dam, but fighting to keep it from collapsing too soon. As lightning split the sky, Daniel struggled to tighten the safety valves. The roar of the dam grew louder, deeper, like a living thing straining against its chains. "Hold," he whispered, "just a little longer." But the crack widened. Water sprayed across his face, cold and relentless. He gritted his teeth, pulling the wrench harder. Then behind him, he heard a voice, breathless, desperate. "Daniel!" He turned. Claire stood in the doorway, soaked and trembling. "You have to leave. The inspectors, they'll arrest you." He shook his head. "If I leave now, this whole place floods. They built too close. The pressure's already breaking through." "Then we'll warn them," she cried. "Please, let's go together." Daniel looked at her, rainwater mixing with the tears on her face. For the first time in weeks, he saw the woman he'd fallen in love with. Not the one who'd signed papers, but the one who still believed in redemption. And that's when the ground beneath them shook. A low, rumbling sound echoed through the valley, deep, primal. The water was rising faster now. Claire's voice broke into a whisper. "Daniel, what's happening?" He turned toward the dam's edge, heart pounding. "It's starting." Chapter 9. The Breaking Point. The sound was deafening, a deep, bone-rattling groan as the dam strained against the impossible weight of the water. Daniel and Claire clung to each other in the control shed doorway, rain hammering down like nails. The flashing red lights along the wall pulsed faster, each one warning that the structure was seconds away from failure. "Daniel," Claire shouted over the storm. "We have to go. It's not safe." He shook his head, gripping the control lever with both hands. "If I open the emergency gate, it might relieve the pressure. If I don't, the whole thing will collapse." Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the valley below, the HOA's precious new homes glittering under construction lights. Trucks sat abandoned, tools scattered, fences half-built. It looked peaceful from afar, but Daniel knew what lay beneath. Weak foundations, stolen soil, and a system of greed built on lies. Claire's voice trembled. "Please, Daniel, come with me. We can fix this later. We can tell the truth, show them everything." Daniel looked at her, soaked, terrified, but still hoping. He wanted to believe her. But every image of Hale's smug grin, every notice nailed to his door, every eviction threat screamed louder than her words. "There is no later, Claire," he said quietly. "They took everything. My land, my name, even you." Before she could answer, a blinding flash tore through the sky, followed by a shattering crack as a section of the dam wall split open. A jet of water exploded from the seam, spraying through the air like liquid glass. Claire screamed. Daniel lunged forward, slamming the manual valve shut, his muscles burning as the handle fought against him. The roar of the flood was almost human, a monstrous growl rising from the depths. "Go," he yelled. "Get to the truck." "I'm not leaving without you," she cried. But he pushed her toward the path leading up the hill. "Now, Claire, go." She stumbled through the mud, tears streaming with the rain. Daniel turned back to the console. The gauges were in the red. The structure was seconds from giving way. He pulled the lever, halfway, opening a single floodgate to divert some of the pressure. Water thundered down the spillway, tearing through the valley like a beast unleashed. The floodlights below flickered, then vanished. Downstream, Hale's car skidded to a stop near the HOA site. He climbed out, umbrella useless against the wind. "What's happening?" he shouted at the workers running for cover. "The dam's cracking, sir," one yelled. "It's overflowing." Hale's face drained of color. He turned toward the reservoir and saw it, a shimmering wall of water beginning to crest. His empire of polished homes, luxury lawns, and endless profits, all standing in the direct path of destruction. Back at the dam, Daniel was losing ground. The floor beneath him shook violently. Concrete shards rained from the ceiling. He gritted his teeth and tried to reach the secondary release valve, but it was jammed. Claire appeared again at the doorway, screaming over the storm. "Daniel, you'll die in there." "I started this," he said, voice breaking. "I'll finish it." But before he could act again, the earth let out one final, thunderous groan, and the dam split wide open. A wave taller than any house he'd ever seen surged forward, consuming everything in its path. Daniel barely had time to grab the railing before the water burst through, sweeping him off his feet. Claire's scream was lost in the roar as the flood tore through the valley below. Hours later, silence. The rain had stopped. The valley that once glimmered with streetlights and fresh construction was now a dark, muddy sea. The homes of Silver Pines estates were gone, erased as if they'd never existed. Claire stumbled through the wreckage, calling Daniel's name into the mist. Her voice echoed across the water, unanswered. Far below, in the fading light, the dam stood fractured but standing, and at its edge, something glimmered beneath the debris. Daniel's flashlight, still glowing. Chapter 10. The Truth Beneath the Water. The morning after the flood dawned gray and heavy, the air thick with the smell of wet earth and broken dreams. Helicopters circled above what used to be Silver Pines estates, their searchlights sweeping across the drowned valley. Pieces of roofs and fences floated on the surface like forgotten memories. Claire stood near the dam's edge, wrapped in a rescue blanket, her face pale and hollow. Mud streaked her hair, and her eyes were red from crying. Around her, emergency crews shouted through radios, marking debris zones, searching for survivors. But she wasn't listening to them. She was listening for him. "Daniel," she shouted, voice cracking. "Daniel, please." No answer, just a soft lap of water against concrete. A sheriff approached, broad-shouldered, mud-stained, his badge glinting dully. "Ma'am, we've recovered 3 bodies downstream. None match his description. We're still searching." Claire nodded weakly. He was near the main valve when it broke. The sheriff sighed. That entire section collapsed into the spillway. If he was there, "I'm sorry." She turned away, clutching the blanket tighter. The truth pressed in on her, heavy and suffocating. Daniel might be gone. And worse, she had been part of what drove him there. Hours passed. As the sun broke through the clouds, divers found Daniel's pickup half buried near the shoreline. Inside, wedged beneath the seat, they discovered a waterproof case. Inside it, a flash drive. Claire's heart stuttered when the sheriff handed it to her. "We'll process it, but if it's personal, you can view it first." She nodded and followed him to a nearby tent. A laptop waited on a muddy table. The sheriff clicked the file open. A single video appeared, timestamped 2 days before the flood. The footage showed Daniel sitting at his desk in the cabin, face lit only by lamplight. His voice was calm, almost detached. "If you're seeing this, I've done something that can't be undone. They stole everything from me, but I need the world to know how." He held up documents, land deeds, bank transfers, emails from the HOA. Hale's signature was everywhere. They built their paradise on stolen ground. "Claire, if you're watching this, I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but Hale used you. You were the bridge that let him take everything. I forgive you, but I can't let him win." Claire's breath caught. Tears spilled freely as Daniel's voice grew faint. "The dam was never meant to kill anyone. I built a bypass to drain it safely. But Hale's men sealed it last week. He knew the structure couldn't take that kind of pressure. He wanted it to fail, wanted the insurance, the payout. If the flood came, he'd collect, and I'd take the blame." Her eyes widened. "Oh my God." The video ended abruptly, the last frame showing Daniel reaching for his jacket, determination etched in his eyes. The sheriff leaned back, stunned. "This changes everything." Within hours, the truth spread. News crews arrived, and investigations began. Hale was nowhere to be found. His mansion, perched high above the valley, stood untouched, but his empire was sinking fast. That evening, as Claire stood overlooking the shattered landscape, she spotted something near the dam's base, a lone piece of driftwood caught on the rocks. She climbed down carefully and froze. It wasn't wood. It was Daniel's jacket, tangled in debris. Inside the pocket, she found a folded note sealed in plastic. Only 5 words were written, smeared by water but still legible. For every lie, a price. Claire sank to her knees, clutching to her chest, sobbing. The world around her was silent except for the wind moving through the valley, the sound of justice, or maybe regret. For the first time, she understood. Daniel hadn't sought revenge. He'd sought truth. And now, that truth was rising from the water for everyone to see. Chapter 11. Hale's Last Move. 2 days after the flood, the once glossy kingdom of Silver Pines Estates was declared a disaster zone. News vans lined the muddy roads. Reporters in raincoats spoke solemnly into microphones, their words carried by the cold morning wind. But inside a sleek, untouched mansion at the top of the hill, Richard Hale was pacing like a trapped animal. The man who once commanded boardrooms and ribbon cuttings now looked ragged, tie loosened, hair damp with sweat, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. On the table before him were newspapers splattered with mud and headlines that screamed his name. Local developer accused of dam sabotage. Evidence suggests insurance fraud in Silver Pines flood. His phone buzzed nonstop. Lawyers, investors, board members, all wanting answers. He ignored them, staring instead at the live news feed on TV, showing the broken dam and the rescue crews below. Lies, he muttered, slamming his fist against the table. All lies. But deep down, he knew the truth had finally surfaced, literally. The flash drive Daniel had left behind had ignited a storm. Every transaction, every falsified permit, every bribe, exposed. The house of cards Hale had built was collapsing faster than the dam ever had. He walked to the window. Down in the valley, the water had begun to recede, revealing the skeletons of his dream. Half-buried houses, twisted steel, shattered fences. For the first time, it looked exactly like what it was, stolen land. A knock echoed through the house. Hale froze. He wasn't expecting anyone. He hesitated, then opened the door. Claire stood there. Her clothes were still muddy, but her eyes were fierce, no longer filled with guilt, but with purpose. "Claire," Hale started, forcing a smile. "You shouldn't be here. The authorities." "Save it," she interrupted coldly. "I know what you did." He laughed nervously. "You're upset, traumatized. You don't know what you're saying." She stepped forward, holding up a small recorder. "Daniel's video is everywhere. The police have copies. The only thing missing is your confession." Hale's mask cracked. "You think you can scare me? You think anyone will believe the word of a grieving woman over me?" "I don't need them to believe me," she said quietly. "The evidence already speaks louder than you ever will." He turned away, running a trembling hand through his hair. "You don't understand, Claire. It was supposed to be clean. The dam was supposed to release, not break. I just needed a little pressure, enough to trigger the insurance clause. No one was supposed to die." She stared at him, stunned by his calm admission. "You used him. You let him take the blame while you got rich." Hale spun around, his eyes wild. He was in the way. He refused to sell, refused to move on. "I gave him chances, more than he deserved." "You destroyed him," she shouted. Silence hung between them, heavy, electric. Finally, Hale exhaled a hollow sound. "It doesn't matter now. I still have what's left. The money's already transferred offshore. In a week, I'll be gone, and this town will move on." But before he could finish, red and blue lights flickered across the window. Dozens of police cars rolled up the hill, tires crunching on gravel. Hale's face went pale. "What?" Claire stepped back, voice steady. "It's over, Richard." He lunged toward her, desperate. "Claire, please. You don't know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," she said, her voice breaking just slightly. "You took everything from Daniel, from me, and you thought you'd walk away." Officers burst through the door. Hale stumbled back, shouting, "I didn't mean for it to happen." But the handcuffs clicked shut before he could say another word. As they let him out, Hale caught one last glimpse of Claire standing in the doorway, her eyes glistening but resolute. For the first time, she wasn't under anyone's control. Not his, not Daniel's memory, not her own guilt. Outside, as the police cars drove down the hill, Claire looked toward the distant dam. The setting sun turned the water golden, as if trying to purify what had been destroyed. She whispered softly, "It's done, Daniel. Justice found him." But even as she spoke, something deep inside her whispered that the story wasn't over. Not yet. Chapter 12, The Water Remembers. Days turned into weeks, and the floodwaters slowly retreated, leaving behind a landscape scarred yet eerily calm. The valley that once glittered with the promise of Silver Pines Estates was now a quiet wasteland of mud and silence. Nature had reclaimed what was stolen, a haunting kind of justice. Claire returned often. She'd walk along the cracked earth where Daniel's cabin once stood, her boots sinking into the soft ground. Every visit hurt, but she came anyway, not out of guilt anymore, but to remember. Hale's arrest had made headlines across the country. Fraud, negligence, and corporate sabotage. The charges stacked higher than his ruined homes. His empire was gone, his accounts frozen, his name reduced to a cautionary headline. But none of that brought Daniel back. One crisp morning, as dawn spilled gold over the valley, Claire arrived with a small wooden box. Inside it were the pieces of Daniel's life, his pocket knife, the old key to his truck, the folded note she had found near the dam. For every lie, a price. She placed the box near the edge of the spillway and sat beside it, the wind brushing against her face. "You were right, Daniel," she whispered. "Truth always finds its way out, even through water." Her voice cracked, but she continued, as if he were still there beside her. "I wish I'd listened. I thought I could fix what Hale started, that if I stayed close to him, I could protect you. But all I did was lose you sooner." She closed her eyes, letting the sound of the river fill the silence. In the distance, the new dam repairs were underway. Engineers and workers carefully rebuilding what had once held so much pain. A voice startled her. "You must be Claire." She turned. It was the sheriff, the same man who'd been there that morning after the flood. He held something wrapped in a weatherproof bag. "Divers found this lodged under the old floodgate. Thought it might belong to you." Inside the bag was a small, mud-stained notebook. Her breath caught when she recognized the handwriting on the cover. Daniel. She opened it carefully. The first few pages were technical sketches, the dam structure, water flow calculations. But then, the words changed. Personal entries written in hurried, uneven lines. "If they take my land, they take my legacy. But they'll never take the truth. Claire still visits. I think she's torn between loyalty and fear. I don't blame her. Sometimes love makes us blind. If something happens to me, I hope she knows I never hated her. I just wanted her to see what was real." Tears fell onto the pages, blurring the ink. On the last page, dated the night before the flood, he had written just one line. "When the water settles, she'll understand." Claire pressed the notebook to her chest, trembling. The dam, the flood, the chaos. It all felt distant now. What remained was his faith in her, even when she didn't deserve it. The sheriff placed a hand on her shoulder. "We're naming the restored reservoir after him, Lake Dawson. Thought you'd want to know." She smiled faintly through the tears. He'd hate that kind of attention, but he'd secretly be proud. As the sheriff walked away, Claire stood, taking one last look at the valley below. The sun glimmered off the calm water, and for the first time, she didn't see ruin, she saw peace. She opened her hand and let the folded note drift into the wind. It fluttered down, landing on the water's surface, floating for a moment before sinking slowly beneath, like a memory finally finding rest. Claire turned toward the camera crews setting up nearby. They were documenting the rebuilding efforts, the promise of renewal. She walked past them, pausing only once to glance back at the dam. A soft smile crossed her face. "The water remembers," she whispered. "But it forgives too." Then she walked away, not to forget, but to begin again. They took his land, his peace, his life, but the water gave him justice. What was stolen has finally been returned. Thank you for watching. And if you believe truth always finds its way, make sure to subscribe for more stories like this. You're watching Zarila HOA Stories.